Hello, welcome research methods students. I am very excited to cover this module on ethics. Within the MPA program, I teach the ethics track for that program. And so it's a topic that's very important to me, especially within a research methods context. However, ethics and research methods is broad. I have read and reviewed entire books on ethics just in research methods, but we still all too often find research failures where trust was broken and ethical conduct was not maintained. And you see examples of this in your reading for this week. Now, I've also found in my experience, my comic experience that is, that Dilbert has had some interesting uh, experiences and events with data within his comics. So let's go ahead and take a look at Dilbert's experience with data. All right, so first of all, those of you that are familiar with Dilbert, he's got to work with Bad Boss here. And Evil Boss here has the following to say about Dilbert's report. So Dilbert says the test data doesn't support our plan. Well, we know our plan is brilliant, so just adjust the data to support it. You mean falsify the data? Let's not get hung up on the definition of things. Now, completely a joke, but at the same time, we see these things all the time. Going through either falsifying data, creating data that is something that we're interested in. They're all too common within not only just an academic setting, but within a policy setting as well. So we need to be very careful on what we're doing with our data. Now, overall, the effectiveness of data and analysis and decision-making depends on more than just technical competency. Now, I hope that you have that technical competency after this class, but being good and having effective data analysis depends on the ethical integrity with which the analysis is performed and presented. So when questions surface about ethics of analysis, its credibility suffers and people may be unwilling to give it much, if any, consideration. Okay, it really is a dagger to the heart if somebody begins to question your data analysis. Specifically, there are three areas of ethical concern: the integrity of purpose, the integrity of the process, specifically within an analysis communication, and third, the integrity of dealing with human subjects. When research and analysis are clear about these matters and technically proficient too, then the role of analysis and decision-making policy is enhanced. Now, in scientific misconduct is generally understood as the violation of the standard norms of scholarly conduct and ethical behavior in scientific research. Though some research norms are codified by associations and employers, and others are sometimes slated specifically in research grants and contracts, the scientific community has also reached a general understanding of what these standards are. Now, violations of the norms include and go beyond plagiarism and data falsification. We've also, which have been well popularized, especially within our current media. As in any community, though, the failure to live up to stated and unstated norms can have harsh consequences. The reading you had on the individual from, oh my goodness, Cornell, I just had a blank. He will lose his complete academic integrity. Everything that he's worked for is now gone because people are questioning the integrity of his data. Now, you have seen these examples in your reading, but this lecture will focus on key principles and norms of research and analysis. Scientific misconduct, when considered by others as significant or severe, can cause not only diminished reputation, but also exclusion from participation and even expulsion of the possibility of career termination and legal action. And within a policy context, legal action is the last thing you want for your agency, your organization, whoever you are working with, the political organization that you may be affiliated with. You do not want to go through legal action. You will lose lots of money, but it comes through not having clear and understanding data and transparency. However, showing that one's analysis meets high research ethics can increase both credibility and quality. So there's a good reason for taking this module very seriously. Now, as managers, first thing needs to be clear is about the purpose of your analysis. Analysis often has a dual purpose. One, to further programs and policies, such as by making them more efficient or effective, and two, to establish factual, objective truths that meet standards of scientific evidence that hold up under scrutiny. Now, the first purpose causes analysis to focus on matters that are relevant to the agency and its mission. Analysts, or future analysts, which you are, need to be forthright in disclosing what questions you considered and those which you did not. No analysis can cover everything. As much as we wish it could, not whatever analysis you do, you're not going to cover everything. So be clear with that. Be clear in your purpose. This is what we're trying to accomplish. This is what we're not trying to accomplish. And it adds greater credibility to your efforts when you do that. I can't tell you the number of reviewers that I've had come back and say, thank you so much for helping us understand what you were trying to accomplish in this paper, in this research. Because if you extend yourself beyond that, it leads to a lot of questions about, again, not only your credibility, but your just ability to be able to analyze data in a meaningful and effective way. Okay. The second purpose in understanding your purpose in data analysis implies that analysts should be open to all facts, whatever they are, and ensure that all facts comply fully with standards of scientific evidence. Now, analysts must disclose and issue caveats for instances in which this is not the case. And it's okay to do that. Okay, there's nothing wrong with having a footnote saying, we did this research, but there were some things that you need to be aware of. Okay, withholding that information can lead to detrimental effects on your reputation. So ethics in analysis requires full disclosure of the purpose of the analysis and the biases, trade-offs, and shortfalls encountered along the way. And they are there. We are limited in our abilities. I don't care how fabulous of a researcher you are, there are limitations that you're going to face. Even with beautiful mixed methods research that we've talked about over the last few modules, there are going to be limitations. You're not going to be able to analyze everything. Be clear on what those shortfalls are. Let other people know that. And it's okay that, we're pretty forgiving within the scientific community in terms of, we recognize that your research isn't going to be perfect. There's going to be limitations, but don't try to hide that. Okay. Now, these dual purposes can sometimes come into conflict, though, forcing ethical choices and decisions. For example, what is a manager to do when careful analysis shows his or her programs are less effective than hoped for, right? Back to Dilbert. Hey, the data shows that we're not as effective as we have been going for. And this becomes even more problematic when you realize that legislative funds may rely on the purpose of your data or your results. So should pursuit of mission cause a blind eye to the facts that are contrary to what the program wanted? Such results may indicate the need for further research or to consider future program changes. But consider another example. Should the agency intentionally ignore questions or analysis that could strengthen the arguments of those who advocate against the program or agency? Okay. And that's always a big concern that policy analysts have, is if I run this data and I get an answer that I don't like, do I have to share that with others? And then what are the consequences with that? So agencies cannot totally ignore their fiduciary responsibilities to society at large, especially when we're talking about taxpayer dollars and the broader impacts. So such counter arguments should be taken into consideration in some way, and you need to be shown in your analysis. Okay, the fact that you're getting grant money or legislative funds introduces potential biases. Make sure you disclose that. You just can't sweep it under the rug or simply ignore it. Okay. Second, managers need to consider the integrity of the analysis and communication process. Many of these considerations are based on the guiding principles of scientific research, specifically to be honest, objective, accurate, and complete. Analysts should not hide facts, change data, falsify results, or consider only data that supports a favored conclusion. The temptation is always going to be there, though. So, for example, data may be sketchy and incomplete, and management's judgment is that such information is better used than ignored. Think again about Dilbert and Evil Boss, right? In this case, the poor quality of the information needs to be stated clearly. We're missing data. Okay, that caveat needs to be given. We don't have the full picture. Our sample isn't perfect. Explain that. Let people know. Okay, again, I think that being clear with your limitations provides, in my opinion, greater credibility to your analysis. It means I can trust what you did before. You recognize that you weren't perfect and you accounted for that. Okay, so analysts should always fully report the source of your data collection methodologies, and any possible gaps and shortfalls, limitations. And you should assess the impact of such shortcomings on your findings. Okay, account for that, and that's okay. It should be obvious not only to you, but to others and myself that findings should not be altered or manufactured in any way, right? That should be obvious. That is outright lying, and people will be justly outraged to know that they have been deceived. There's nothing worse than providing a report and having people come back and realize that that report was false. it will ruin your career. It's that simple. It will ruin your career. Data fabrication and any study falsification are various serious forms of not only scientific misconduct, but many scientists feel that the omission of relevant counter conclusions is equally serious. Okay, it's frustrating. Um, and yet regrettably each year cases of scientific misconduct and fraud make headlines. Go back to our reading example. Unfortunately, I could have even pulled a headline from an even more recent and still found examples of data misuse. uh, they're there, and I understand that there are a lot of pressures that contribute to that, especially within the academic world. But it's not something that we should really fall into that type of temptation. Okay, it is equally important that as an analyst, you be as meticulous and objective as possible in testing your findings. Okay, findings should be checked for errors and inaccuracy. Conclusions should be examined for the possibility of alternative or rival explanations. What if you are wrong? That is a question you should always be asking yourself: is what if I'm wrong? What damage will come about if I am wrong? And then do you feel as confident and comfortable in providing your analysis? Honestly, there are times where I've gone back and I've asked that question, what if I'm wrong? And looked at my data and said, you know what? That's something I can live with. I've provided my data in a way and my analysis in a way that I can live with it if I'm wrong, because I did my part and it was very clear and obvious that I accounted for everything that I could that was in my control. Okay. When you don't do that, it's just not proper. But again, when you do, it strengthens your study findings by providing detailed knowledge of validity and robustness. By having that discussion in your papers, people find you more credible. Again, it's okay to be able to discuss those gaps and limitations. People will appreciate that, especially within the scientific community. Excuse me. The more that is known about data and results, the more confidence that others are going to have in not only your data, but in you as a research analyst, as a policy analyst. Excuse me. The next step is communication and research, and it matters. And results need to be presented in straightforward and non-misleading ways. For example, analysts should not adjust scales to give appearances of significant increase when the increase is in fact minor and insignificant. And we see examples of this. You've seen or heard stories about people making their graphs bigger or just adjusting the scale a little bit so that it looked like things were similar, but really the difference was much bigger, or they adjusted the scale to make the difference look bigger and it really wasn't. Don't do that. Don't be that person. Okay. Such misrepresentations are considered the same as lying within statistics. Okay? It's not good practice. Findings should be communicated in ways that are straightforward and easy to understand for both experts and non-experts, without oversimplification or deception. Teach in a way that people not only understand, but so that they can't misunderstand. They need to be able to walk out of there and be like, oh, I understood exactly what that person did in terms of their data analysis. Now, these ethical norms are not merely standards for evaluating analysis that has already been undertaken and presented. Rather, these norms provide essential guidance to you as an analyst throughout the entire analytical process. As you decide what to analyze, how to write your findings, how to present, you need to consider this process. And while these guidelines are straightforward, they may weigh heavy on analysts working for, again, advocacy organizations and some government agencies who are both being told to produce results that, argue a position. That is hard. And that's something in the political world that we live in, especially when funding is as limited and we're battling for any penny that we can get within an agency or an organization. The temptation is strong to communicate your data in a way that isn't accurate or is dishonest. Again, don't fall for that. Your credibility is going to stick with you throughout your career, or your lack of credibility as well. Make sure it's one that is of honesty and integrity, because that's going to set you apart in my mind, within the political realm. It's going to make sure that you go from having potential short-term success that comes with lying to having a long-term career that you can be proud of. And that's the important thing to me. Really, an issue with all of this are the practices that include intentionally improper science. Okay, the intentional omission of evidence, facts that are represented in misleading ways, and argumentation against facts. Credible leading advocacy organizations recognize the value of being truthful and objective. Okay, it's to their advantage to be truthful, and they often pursue analysis or research in ways that provide deeper understanding related to the policy goals, and which stand the test of scientific scrutiny. I think that's where greater grant money comes in, is if you can show that you are credible, people can trust your results, right? So the class of ideas and policies is proper in any democracy, but it's best conducted with evidence that does not add liability by jeopardizing one's credibility. Okay, do not jeopardize your credibility. That's what's going to make your career, is making sure that you have credibility throughout, that you are reliable. The moment you lose that, your career is going to falter. Okay. In recent years, considerable attention has been given to the impact of research on the well-being of human subjects in research. Why is that the case? Well, we as researchers haven't been fabulous in that area. We haven't always taken care of our subjects. We can look at some of the great studies that have been done in conducting the social sciences, where we may have we did cross the line in terms of human subjects. You think about the Milgram study, you think about the Stanford prison study. We didn't always consider what our studies were doing on our participants. So some key ethical principles of research involving people are that their participation needs to be voluntary and based on informed consent. Now, when I say informed consent, I mean that they should know exactly what they're getting involved in. They need to know exactly what they're participating in. Additionally, information about your subject should be held confidential. Okay, we do everything we can to protect data and protect people's information, and the risk of harm to subjects should be minimized and reasonable in relationship to anticipated benefits. Okay, that's something that we have to spell out very clearly in our studies. We need to be able to tell individuals what they should expect, both risks and benefits from the studies. And concerns about the well-being of human subjects, arise from where does this all come about? Well, it arises from various medical research experiments that intentionally misled patients and exposed them to great harm. So I talked about some examples, but here's some more. Some landmark examples of scientific misconduct involving humans in medicine include the Nazi war crimes during World War II, in which concentration camp prisoners were subjected to torture and poisonous injections to see how they'd be affected. In the US, the Tuskegee syphilis study that ran from the 1930s to all the way to the 70s used as a subject several hundred black males with untreated syphilis without informed consent. They didn't know what they were getting into. And this was even after penicillin was found to be an effective antibiotic treatment in the 1940s. You still have an additional 30 years where these black males were neither informed about nor offered treatment choices. That's a pretty ugly black eye on the scientific process. In the Willowbrook study in 1960s and 1963 to 66, we also have examples where newly admitted children with mental handicaps were injected with hepatitis in order to track the natural history of the disease. While parents had to approve of the treatments, that approval only came because it was necessary as a condition for admission into the facility. Okay. Regrettably, though, the cases do not stand alone. Instances of deceit and coercion, whether subtle or blatant, led to the development of ethical principles previously mentioned, the things that we're talking about now. Unfortunately, there are many other examples of research misconduct. So, for example, in one case, public healthcare workers lost a confidential file of known AIDS patients that was later sold at a local nightclub. Okay, not pretty. Most human subjects research is now overseen by institutional review boards or IRBs to ensure that risks to subject are reasonable and that possible harm is identified and minimized. These boards are committees at universities and other research institutions composed of scientists, of course, who evaluate the protocols of the proposed research. We have an IRB board here at SUU. I've worked with them on multiple projects, and I've always appreciated their input. It's fabulous to be able to bring someone in your study from outside of all the biases that you bring into the study, and to help identify where you could be going wrong, where you could be potentially putting people at risk. And so I've always appreciated working with the IRB. It's a process that takes time. It's something you have to include in your timetable as you're building your study, but it's worth the time to keep individuals protected. So if you're interested, check out SUU's IRB. I'll make sure to have a link to that on Canvas as well. Really, the point of all these boards and these committees is that we confront ethical issues in research pretty much every time we do research, and we need to learn from those past errors, and the boards and those committees help us do that. So, for example, what ethical issues are involved in a push to have The U.S. Food and Drug Administration approves some drugs early before they've been fully tested. The notions of research not causing unnecessary harm and being upfront with participants are now fully established ethical principles. Okay, it's the expectation, it's the norm. If analysis involves access to confidential data, then steps must be taken to ensure that the data are protected, that the impact of this research is minimized. Okay, and you as managers have that responsibility as well. You need to be mindful of the negative impacts that the analysis may have. Oops. Hold on. I just realized I lost my PowerPoint. I'll get it back up. Sorry, everyone. Okay, here we go. Okay, but back to what I was saying though is really the impact of research on human subjects needs to be considered. We really have to take steps to minimize and address any harmful impacts. Now, the interest of affected parties should be considered by ensuring that that our conclusions are accurate and fair as well. So what are the key things we need to consider when it comes to human subjects? One, it needs to be voluntary. They need to be understand what they're giving into, and then they need to consent to that. And the way they do that is through informed consent. All right. In summary, okay, as we go back and look at all of this, be honest, be complete, be useful, and be mindful. And I'm confident that you will complete ethical research. Again, analysis and data are commonly used by public nonprofit managers to support decisions. You will see it in the political science world. It's common. However, analysis is useful because it helps provide an objective, factual underpinnings to situations and programs, and helps quantify the extent of problems and solutions. When it's not honest, when it's not complete, that doesn't happen. Okay. Analysis grounded in research methods provides a rigorous way of understanding policies, programs, politics, governments, and are about asking certain questions about them. Okay, at the very least, a focus on facts and objective analysis can help reduce judgment errors that stem from impressionistic or subjective perceptions. Okay, analysis and data are often used to describe problems, programs, and policies, and so to assist in monitoring programs and making decisions that make them more effective or efficient, and to evaluate outcomes. But they can only be relied upon when we are ethical in our analysis, when we are ethical in our efforts, and we are clear about that. Okay, again, that we are honest, complete, useful, and mindful. And these are things that we need to consider. These are things that we need to go through. And you can go through each one of these things and recognize their value. So whether it's just not hiding the facts, being straightforward and presenting your results, reporting all the data and results, identify the limitations, the weaknesses to your study, and reporting that, and then be thorough. And then this is a favorite word of mine, meticulous, okay, in your analysis. And then walk people through that process. As you present your reports, as you provide your reports, you should be walking through individuals through your analysis. They should know what steps you took to get to the findings that you had. Okay. And then that data needs to be useful. People need to be able to take it and actually do something with it, which we're not always great with in academic settings, but we need to be better. And then be mindful. Information has a lot of power. We need to recognize that, and we need to recognize that as I share this information, how is that going to impact others? And then even if it impacts others negatively, maybe there's an opportunity for improvement and growth. And so we shouldn't be afraid of sharing that as well. Okay. So again, the effectiveness of data and analysis and decision making depends on more than just technical competency. It also depends and is reliant, okay, on ethical integrity with which research is performed. Areas of ethical concern involve, again, the integrity of the research process, the integrity of the analysis and communication, and the integrity of dealing with human subjects. Analysts and public and nonprofit organizations, wherever you end up working within the political science world, within the policy world, you need to recognize how important this work is, and you serve an important role in making sure that this work is done in an ethical way. Okay. Specifically, as part of your role, you need to recognize you have multiple purposes. You need to promote programs and policies, but do it in a way that establishes factual, objective truths that meet standards of scientific evidence. analysis needs to be forthcoming about the purposes that it serves and about the ways in which these purposes have affected others and affect the programs that you're going to work with, the policy decisions that are being made from it. And as you do that, you will find really greater success in the work that you're doing. So that's all I have for our lecture this week. But again, I want you to continue to consider just the value and the importance in the work that you're doing as future policy analysts. But that it all relies on your ethical base. If you are not credible, if anyone even questions your credibility in your analysis, it's gonna have a negative effect in your career, and that's the last thing I want for each of you. I want you to be able to have long-lasting worlds in the policy careers in the policy world. And again, that will best happen as you maintain an ethical and credible work ethic, and that's going to be key to your success. So thank you for your time. And if you have any questions about this, you want to even learn more, if you want to dive into some more books on ethics and the research methods, I'm happy to provide those resources. But I'm going to go ahead and let you go now, and we'll talk to you on our next module.